The MLB steroid era began in secret, quiet conversations in a locker room among teammates on how to get better, an understanding between reporters and players not to cover what was really going on, and Major League Baseball okay with looking the other way. The era ended publicly in front of Congress, baseball fans, and America, a stain on the national pastime, and tied for the Black Sox as the greatest cheating scandal in the game's history. The scandal impacted baseball's biggest stars and most hallowed records, and the game was never the same after. How did it start? How did it end? And how do baseball fans continue to contend with its legacy? In the summer of 1998, Major League Baseball was having a great renaissance. 4 years after the 1994 strike, attendance had finally recovered, and now was booming as the nation was captured by two sluggers chasing history. In 1961, Roger Maris had passed Babe Ruth's 60 home run in a season mark by getting to 61. Now, 37 years later, two players, Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa, were vying to pass it. Both men were likable. McGwire, a humble kid from California, the son of a dentist, and Sosa, an energetic outfielder from the Dominican who would tap both his feet together every time he hit a home run. The press hounded each player for quotes after the game on if they thought they would break the record. And one time in the Busch Stadium locker room, a reporter for the AP, Steve Wilstein, looked up at McGwire's locker and found a small, innocuous bottle titled androstenedione. He wrote the name down in his notebook, and upon researching it, found that the substance was a performance-enhancing drug, banned by the NFL and the Olympics. When the reporter questioned him about it, McGwire said this, quote, "Everything I've done is natural. Everybody that I know in the game of baseball uses the same stuff I use. Somebody tells me that it's illegal and I shouldn't be using it, I will stop. I have no knowledge of it," Commissioner Bud Selig said. "The Cardinals are a disciplined organization. I don't think anything goes on there that shouldn't." Cardinals manager Tony La Russa suggested that Wilstein should be banned from the Cardinals clubhouse because he shouldn't have been talking about this stuff. Overall, the press, the players, and fans paid little attention to this story, and the allure of chasing that record remained intact for about 10 years. Then, the whole legacy of this season, McGwire's career and Sosa's career, was tainted. The heroes America propped up were called cheaters, and baseball was never the same. When the scandal broke, some old-timers might say, "This is such crap. I hate these steroid players. Baseball was always a pure game, never had any cheating." They'd be wrong. More than any other sport, baseball, with its slow pace, has room for cheating. Hall of Fame pitcher Gaylord Perry mastered the use of sticky stuff, throwing his spitball with Vaseline on his head and hidden behind his glove for 20 seasons. When Bobby Thompson hit his famous shot heard around the world against the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1951, the Giants were using an illegal sign-stealing system, so he knew it was coming. And the 1986 Mets had a box of the drug speed in their locker room to help them focus during games. In the 1980s, MLB commissioners Peter Ueberroth and Fay Vincent were focused on getting cocaine out of the game. Public trials stained MLB and impacted some of the game's biggest stars, Keith Hernandez, Tim Raines, and the Pirate Parrot, who was supplying them with coke. I didn't make that up. That happened. MLB suspended 4 players, gave others community service. Oh no, Dusty Baker, no! Why, Dusty? The thing about cocaine is, while it does make you feel cool, it doesn't help you hit the ball farther or throw the ball any faster. Underneath MLB's coke-covered noses, a more complex substance was growing in popularity amongst players. In the early 1980s, bunting, hit and runs, stolen bases were all the rage. But as the decade ended, home runs were increasing at a remarkable pace, and those practices slowly decreased. Feats previously thought remarkable, such as hitting 50 home runs in a season, became commonplace. Home run distance skyrocketed, and in 1988, a player hit 40 home runs and stole 40 bases in a season for the first time. That player's name was Jose Canseco. In 1993, in Cleveland, an Indians hitter hit a deep fly ball to right, and Canseco looked to field the ball, but it hit him on the head and went over the fence for a home run. Canseco is quite the character. In the last few years, he's painted his turtle like Iron Man. He tweets crazy things constantly, and one time accidentally shot his finger off while cleaning his gun. Back in the 90s, however, he was one of the first players to use PEDs, or performance-enhancing drugs, and as he succeeded, the practice popularized. Teammate Mark McGwire ballooned in size and hit homers at a pace like his partner. They became called the Bash Brothers. As steroid practices grew, MLB knew it was happening. They sent out a league-wide memo in 1991 that PEDs were illegal, but the memo failed to state that they would really do anything about it if you were caught. In the 80s, MLB had actually sent out a similar memo that said, please don't do cocaine. You might be wondering, if this scandal was growing, if they had some knowledge that it was happening, why didn't they take more action? Well, in order to implement a strict testing program, Major League Baseball would have needed the MLB Players Association's approval, and in 1994, they were gearing up for a fight generations in the making, and drug testing was low on the list of things that they needed to sort out. In 1994, baseball was having a historic season. Tony Gwynn was hitting .394. The Montreal Expos were in first place by 6 games, and Matt Williams had 54 home runs when the season abruptly ended in mid-August. Why? Well, the players went on strike. This fight was decades in the making. In the 1970s, after 50 years of fighting, the Players Union had won the right to free agency. In the 1980s, the league's owners colluded not to compete with each other in that marketplace, and it tanked the market. Now, the big fight was about a salary cap. Owners desperately wanted to limit the amount a team could spend for quote-unquote competitive reasons, save money. And players didn't want a salary cap because it would limit the free agent market. Make more money! The fight lasted almost a full year and ultimately left both sides unhappy. In that fight, a whole World Series was lost, and the league was in no position to argue about drug testing. Any new program would have had to have the Players Union's approval, and they stuck to a basic principle that it was an invasion of privacy to test for performance-enhancing drugs. Therefore, nothing was really done about this issue. When the '94 strike ended, thanks to a federal court ruling by future Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, bigger problems were in MLB and the players' hands. Attendance was down 20%, and baseball needed to do a lot to get people back in the ballpark. And nothing gets people in the seats like dingers. No, not the Rockies mascot, a home run. It's a word for a home run. This is where the steroid era really took off. Whereas before, it had been maybe a quarter of players who did steroids, now a majority started to inject their butts with drugs. In 1996, Ken Caminetti, a third baseman for the San Diego Padres, won the NL MVP, and in 2002, he admitted to Sports Illustrated reporter Tom Verducci he took steroids. Caminetti's logic was frank and simple. Quote, "It's no secret what's going on in baseball. At least half the guys are using steroids. They talk about it, they joke about it with each other. The guys who want to protect themselves or their image by lying about not doing have that right. Me? I'm at the point in my career where I've done just about everything bad you can do. I try to walk with my head up. I don't have to hold my tongue. I don't want to hurt teammates or friends, but I've got nothing to hide. If a young player were to ask me what to do, I'm not going to tell him it's bad. Look at all the money in the game. You have a chance to set your family up, to get your daughter into a better school. So I can't say, don't do it." End quote. Caminetti's quotes make a lot of sense from a player's perspective on why he would do performance-enhancing drugs. This was probably the same logic that Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa had in 1998, as we discussed at the beginning of the video, when they were chasing the home run single-season record. In that season, MLB attendance peaked. Excitement was constant throughout the summer as Sosa and McGwire traded places in the home run leaderboards. Tension built on who would break the record first, and ultimately both were able to, with Sosa hitting 66 and McGwire hitting 70. When McGwire broke Roger Maris's record, Bud Selig presented McGwire with a Commissioner's Achievement Award, the first ever given. At this point, it was obvious that the fans loved this new era of baseball. The league fully endorsed it as it was raising ticket prices and attendance, and the players themselves had no moral issue with it. So what's the problem with steroids anyway? So why is steroids cheating? The basic fact that in the 1990s, in baseball, steroids weren't really cheating. While technically illegal, there was no testing or suspension system, so why would a player care? The modern athlete uses hundreds of performance-enhancing mechanisms. Sensory deprivation tanks, intense new surgeries which allow injuries to heal faster, and FTX to make sure you invest smarter. Yo, Steph Curry, you told me to put all my money there and I lost everything. What the heck? Many players take vitamins, keep a strict, regulated diet, and train rigorously. All of these enhance performance, but steroids are a bit different. First off, the word steroid covers an ever-expanding list of chemical substances that are developed and then promptly banned that I cannot list because I almost failed 10th grade chemistry. Steroids combined with intensive weightlifting often allow for quicker muscle growth, previously incapable with some body types. For baseball players, if you're on steroids, it can make the bat go 1 inch quicker, the ball travel 3 miles per hour faster when you throw it, and in a game of intensive averages, these differences mean the world. Millions of dollars, all-star appearances, MVPs, even Hall of Fame plaques. The morality of PEDs comes into play when you think about long-term health impacts on the players. Steroids have loads of side effects and often are not FDA approved. They're supplied in shady offices by companies like Bay Area Laboratory Cooperative or BALCO by people who weren't doctors. Therefore, side effects and long-term health effects with heart problems are very rampant. Additionally, steroids use testosterone and other supplements which aren't really safe for anyone, but especially high school athletes, who were starting to use steroids on a frequent basis when they play baseball because that's what they saw they needed to do to get to the big leagues on TV. It also makes the game inauthentic to viewers. When people who look like us succeed naturally, we idolize it. The hard work is on display and millions watch. But when giants come to the plate and hit prodigious blasts previously thought impossible, we watch, we cheer, but something feels off and doesn't quite sit right. This came to a head slowly. Most fans initially believed that modern man had just naturally evolved to hitting these types of stats. Mark McGwire was just a freak, but as more and more randos started hitting 55 or 57 or 59 home runs in a season, things just didn't seem right. No player challenged the league more in the questions of morality of steroids than its greatest player ever, one Barry Lamar Bonds. In the beginning of his career, the quick 5-tool Bonds became the first player ever to steal 400 bases and hit 400 home runs. As he entered his 30s, he saw how other accomplishments were gaining more attention than that one was. Bonds knew that if he had the same regimen of steroids that Sosa and McGwire were on, he could be even better. And better he was. In 2001, Barry Bonds had the most insane offensive season in MLB history. He broke the single-season record which Mark McGwire had set only 3 years earlier by hitting 73 home runs instead of 70. He homered almost every 6 at-bats, got walked almost 200 times, and still managed to hit bomb after bomb after bomb. Maybe the craziest thing about this season was Bonds was already 36. Another player who was doing similarly crazy stuff was Roger Clemens, who won 5 Cy Young Awards and was striking out hitters prodigiously with no sign of letting up into his late 30s. Both Bonds and Clemens had clearly increased in size from when they first came up in the big leagues. Like a lot. Like not they went to the gym. Like they're a different head size. Both were also not really great teammates, and both really didn't like the baseball media. Barry Bonds' father, Bobby Bonds, had been kicked out of the league for alcoholism in the 1970s and was not treated very fairly by the racist media back in those days. He was always resentful of this and never trusted any media members. This led to resentment among reporters. Bonds would constantly be standoffish and mean towards them, and when the scandal started taking off, they made him the symbol of the steroid era, of everything that was wrong with baseball. Whenever Bonds came up late in his career, he was promptly booed by fans all across the country.
Boo me, cheer me, those are gonna cheer me, those are gonna boo me. So what? But they still don't come see the show. And I'm happy. Dodger Stadium is the best show I ever go to in all my baseball. They say Barry sucks louder than anybody out there. And you know what? You'll see me in left field going just like this. Because you know what? You got to have some serious talent to have 53,000 people saying you suck.
In 2005, Jose Canseco had retired from baseball, but he still kind of wanted some attention. So he published an all-tale memoir called Juiced. In it, he described how he would have never made the majors if not for steroids, and how he personally injected Mark McGwire, Rafael Palmeiro, Jason Giambi, Ivan Rodriguez, and Juan Gonzalez. Now, fun fact about steroids, you don't inject it into the vein, you inject it into the butt. So right on, Jose. The book was a smash hit, and now finally fans were growing upset with the game and what it had become, especially older fans. And a powerful group of old baseball fans was in the U.S. Congress. So in reaction to the book, they called in a bunch of sluggers to talk to them about how they felt about steroids in baseball. Here, Mark McGwire said he didn't want to talk about the past.
What other supplements did you use?
I'm not here to talk about the past.
Here, Rafael Palmeiro famously proclaimed,
"Let me start by telling you this. I have never used steroids, period."
Wrong, he did. As the most powerful government in the world was asking players who hit balls with sticks why they would take drugs, you might wonder how we got here. How did the players, the game, allow this to happen? For this stain to go so public, so national, so big? There are 3 true power brokers in Major League Baseball: the players, the league, and the fans. And all 3 were complicit in letting the steroid era take off. Let me explain. First, the players. The MLB Players Association could have seen that steroids would have hurt the game and worked with the league to institute a fair testing strategy in the early 90s, but other battles at the time seemed far more important, and a blanket no testing policy was helpful to protect privacy. Players themselves were then caught between a rock and a hard place. Those who had moral questions or health concerns about steroid use had to look around and think about the player and the minors who was already taking them, looking to take their jobs. The player who juiced would see his skills rapidly increase, as the player who chose to abstain would have to just work harder by himself. Hundreds of players were eventually revealed as quote-unquote cheaters, but at the time they made rational decisions which ultimately extended many careers. These were hyper-competitive people. A football player doesn't think about brain trauma before game day. They go out, they try their best, and they crash some skull. Health concerns for years down the road rarely stop athletes from competing in the moment. If the league allows them to, there's no reason most of them wouldn't. Alright, the second baseball stakeholder in the steroid scandal was the league, the owners of the team represented by Commissioner Bud Selig. They knew that steroids was happening. They're not stupid. I mean, some of them are stupid, but they're not that stupid. The players were juicing, but the records were being broken and the money was flowing into their pockets, so they looked the other way. When that money started to be threatened by the third stakeholder, fans, that's when they took action. Whether the fans be in Congress or in ballparks booing people like Barry Bonds, MLB took notice that this was not a popular thing, that they had to crack down on steroids in order to keep the integrity of the game, and the integrity of the game meant more fans and more money for them. This is why the players and the owners worked aggressively to stop doping. They then instituted a strict testing policy: 50 games for one failed test, 100 games for 2, a lifetime ban for 3, and if the whole class passed, free recess on Thursdays and ice cream. But while Major League Baseball was making marked progress in getting steroids out of the game, there was one player they still just couldn't touch: Barry Bonds. And he was barreling down at its most sacred record, Hank Aaron's mark of 755 career home runs. Henry Louis Aaron was the last Negro leaguer to retire from Major League Baseball. He played for the Indianapolis Clowns in the Negro Leagues and then came up with the Milwaukee Braves in the 1950s. For over 20 years, he was a constant force. Modest and humble, he just smashed home runs consistently year after year. And by the end of 1973, he was one home run away from tying Babe Ruth's all-time record of 714. In the offseason, he endured lots of racist hate mail by white fans who didn't want him to break the great Babe's record and wanted him to preemptively retire. Hank Aaron did not, and on opening day 1974, he hit his 714th home run, tying the Babe. A few days later in Atlanta, he hit his 715th. It was one of the great moments in baseball history. As he was rounding second, 2 random guys just kind of congratulated him, and when he crossed home plate, he found his mother in the crowd, and she gave him a hug. "I never knew my mother could hug so tight," Aaron said later.
Henry Aaron is coming around third. His teammates are at home plate, and listen to this crowd.
Flash forward almost 40 years, and Barry Bonds was barreling down this record of 755 home runs. But unlike Aaron, who was a humble guy loved by all MLB fans, Bonds was controversial, brash, and by many was considered a cheater. Throughout the 2007 season, Bonds was booed at most stadiums he went to, but every single one of those stadiums was also sold out. In August 2007, Bonds broke Aaron's record, hitting his 756th home run off the Washington Nationals. At the ceremony, a clip from Hank Aaron played on the scoreboard, but Aaron himself was not in attendance, and neither was Commissioner Bud Selig. Many older fans saw this record being broken as a stain on the game that cannot be forgiven. Its greatest record was now held by an active cheater, an all-around mean person. Despite being one of the most feared hitters in the game, when Bonds was a free agent after the 2007 season, he did not receive an offer from any of the 30 teams. The distractions were too much, and he retired silently. In Cooperstown, New York, the biggest stars in baseball history have plaques at the Baseball Hall of Fame. From Joe DiMaggio to Ted Williams to Honus Wagner, all generations of players are represented in the hallowed halls of the Baseball Hall of Fame, except one generation has most of its biggest stars missing. While cheaters from other generations like Gaylord Perry, who used sticky stuff, got into the Hall of Fame, and the enablers of the steroid era, whether that be Commissioner Bud Selig or manager Tony La Russa, also got into the Hall of Fame. But despite having comparable statistics to other members, many of the hitters and pitchers who took steroids, Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire, Jose Canseco, Rafael Palmeiro, Roger Clemens, and Barry Bonds were not voted into the Hall by baseball writers. But the logic is inconsistent. The Hall is also full of players who were accused. David Ortiz, Ivan Rodriguez, and Frank Thomas were all rumored at some point to have used steroids, but all got their day in Cooperstown. The Hall of Fame is perhaps the biggest sign that over the last few years, baseball has still struggled to reconcile with what the steroid era meant and should continue to mean. In 2010, Mark McGwire said that it was finally time to talk about the past and admitted that he used steroids in his famous 1998 season. Barry Bonds and other players have never admitted to steroid use. For baseball, its record book has been permanently tainted. The National Pastimes Codex of famous stats like Joe DiMaggio's 56-game hitting streak, Nolan Ryan's 5,714 strikeouts, or Ricky Henderson's 1,406 stolen bases is now covered in asterisks and ambiguity. Since 2008, many prominent players have been banned for using performance-enhancing drugs. Manny Ramirez, Alex Rodriguez, Ryan Braun, Robinson Cano, and most recently Fernando Tatis Jr. But the issue is far less prevalent thanks to ever-evolving testing strategies. Cheating in baseball, however, remains an ever-present issue in the sport. So much of the problem in how baseball fans talk about the steroid era revolves around blame. We don't know who to blame for why it happened. We blame the players, they're the cheaters. We blame the managers or the league for not cracking down sooner. But there's someone else who needs blame, and it's you, the fans. When we watched those home runs, we didn't look hard at what was going on. We wanted to believe we were really witnessing true greatness, that man had evolved and the ball could just travel farther than ever. The players wanted to help us believe in this myth, and the league didn't mind stopping us from believing it. Can we really blame them? Baseball is more fair now, but was far more popular during the steroid era's peak. As players today continue to do amazing things, we're left jaded. The records are impossible to catch, the luster is gone, and the modern fan is speculative of something truly special and new. But once in a while, something still comes around that leaves you with that same wonder. Mark McGwire blast, or Babe Ruth homer, or Willie Mays catch once did, and the national pastime goes on.